All right, we are back with another conversation on leadership. Today, our guest is Michael Tritthart. Michael comes to us from Plano, Texas. He's with Keller Williams in Plano. And Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself real quickly for those who don't know you.
Yeah, sure. And John, first off, thanks for doing these. I appreciate being on here. A little bit about me. I have been training real estate agents since 2001. And prior to that, I was a middle school and high school teacher and football coach here in Texas. And, the whole Friday Night Lights thing that you guys have seen the book, read the book and seen the movies and the TV show, it's all true. It's insane here. We have $70 million football stadiums. People go crazy for Friday Night Lights. So I did that for 6 years and it was fun. It was a blast. It was a grind. And I decided in 2001 to step out of that into educational training. And I joined a local title company in the Dallas market. And I started to train real estate agents on technology. And so that's where that all pretty much started and has just taken off from there since.
Awesome. So, it's a good segue, right? How did you end up choosing to go into the educational route, especially in real estate? What was the driving force for you there?
I've always wanted to do education. I have a master's of education. And, I know a lot of people when they go, oh, he's a football coach. My football coach, who was a teacher, we took that class off. We didn't teach. We didn't do anything. I always enjoyed the education aspect of it. And I took pride in that. And I was actually the team lead, the academic team lead at the schools that I was at. So I always enjoyed that aspect. I wanted to parlay that into adult education, professional education. And I had an opportunity to join this title company back in 2001. And it was a big break because the person who hired me was a former teacher who was looking for a fellow teacher to create curriculum that we could get certified by the state of Texas. And my CE classes that I got certified back in 2001 for technology training for real estate agents, I think I was either number 1 or number 2 in the state of Texas for getting it certified by the state for tech training.
Awesome. Love that. So, Michael, tell us, what's one of the best investments you've ever made, whether it was of time, money, resources, what have you?
So I'm a big proponent of investing in your time. And there's actually a program that I'm a part of. It's called cashflowtactics.com. And what they do is they teach the investment aspect. And they ask that same question, what do you want to invest in, time or money? And depending on your answer, they're going to take you down a different path. For me, time has always been the most important factor. I feel that if you invest in your time, that's going to multiply your money faster than anything else. And a big part of that as well, too, because I travel and train all over the U.S., Canada, Puerto Rico, I'm on the road quite a bit. I made the commitment to my family to, number one, make sure that I was there for all my kids' events when they were growing up. My son's now off to college. My daughter's a sophomore. She's still deeply involved in all the events that she's doing at the high school. That's prearranged on my schedule. I always say the number one thing I put on my schedule is vacation and then the time for the kids. And
I'm sure there's an awful lot of material that you and I read that has to do with precisely that, scheduling your priorities first. So
time block is essential. Yeah. I live my life by time blocks and I live my life by priority, not priorities, because that's multitasking. Like I'm a certified one thing instructor. So the one thing is ingrained in me. And whenever I would go out and do my training, especially when the kids were younger, we had a little bit more flexibility in terms of schedules. I would always make sure that the family could go with me on the trips that they wanted to go to. Like I could always get them to go to the training that I was doing in Hawaii, but I somehow, for whatever reason, I couldn't get them to go to Amarillo, Texas or Lubbock, right? They'll do Hawaii, but they'll skip West Texas, right?
Okay. Awesome. I love that. So, what's one quirk or odd thing about you that, many people may not know?
I wouldn't necessarily, it's a quirk, but I'm an adventure seeker. So I like to do some crazy stuff, some fun stuff. I ran with the Bulls in Pamplona with a friend of mine. I have a deathly scared mentality around sharks. They scare me to death, but we swam with sharks, with dolphins, with manatees. We've zip-lined over an alligator pit. We crossed one bridge to go to ziplining in Maui that it was like the Raiders of the Lost Ark bridge over that huge canyon, and it was ropes and it was swinging. We weren't hooked into anything, and that's probably the most scared I've been in my whole life. That was pretty intense. But I do like to do adventure stuff, and I think
adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, and yeah. I've done the the racetrack here, Texas Motor Speedway. We've done the race cars. But what I like about it is my kids do that as well too. My son, he's 19, he's skydived already.
Wow.
So we like to do the adventure stuff.
That's awesome. I love that. So what habit do you have that most positively affects your mindset and your life?
So I think the biggest habit is the singularity habit, focusing on one element at a time. And I think that comes from the one thing. And what was interesting is when I first read the book years ago, and since then have become a certified instructor on it, I realized as I read the book, I was already implementing the one thing in my lifestyle before the book even came out. And I think that came back from my coaching days. There's a lot of chaos going on with football coaching or any sports. And you have to be able to break it down in simplistic terms I was coaching the offensive line, for the offensive line to be able to move as one. They had to understand their specific role on any given play. And then you break that down even further. It's the correct stance, the correct steps, everything. And so I've always had that mentality of being able to focus on one element at a time. And in doing so, it's unlocked super success for me.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you. So what bad advice do you hear most often in our profession?
It's really more bad habits than anything else from leaders. And I will say some of the best examples in leadership I learned from some of the worst leaders in leadership.
Really?
And yeah. And this goes back to the coaching days. This goes back to businesses that I was involved in other places. They're not putting the focus on where it needs to be, which is the customer. In the coaching days, I worked for a head coach who quite honestly did not like his family and didn't want to go home to his family. And if the head coach doesn't want to go home to his family, guess what? The staff doesn't get to go home to their family. So we were working 7 hours a week, 105 hours a week back in the coaching days because of that situation. So it's really more the bad habits than anything else versus bad advice. Being a former teacher, I always tell everybody when I joke in my classes, I see everything and I hear everything. And I'm really kind of evaluating and watching everyone in any given situation. And I learn from that. So it may not be something that they necessarily say to me. It's the actions that I see in that person. Awesome.
Love that. So what book or books do you most often recommend and why?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing, and we've mentioned it already, that is essential for any business owner that's out there. I think a good amplification of that is a book called 5+1. And that's written by Chas Wilson, C-H-A-S Wilson. And Dave Jinks is also part of that as well too. And what I really like about those two books is, number one, the one thing is more of the mindset. Like, yes, this is how I need to operate. 5+1 is the operation. Like, how do I actually put this into play in my business life? So that's a good 1-2 punch. I'm actually a big podcast guy. I listen to more podcasts than anything else that's out there. Another one I listen to, we have a short-term rental that we purchased in Panama City Beach, Florida. So I listen to the short-term rental show. It's a podcast and they just talk about aspects of that. But I'm also a history buff. I was a history teacher. And I think one that everybody should listen to, it's pretty wild, but they can document everything from a historical point of view. And it kind of shows us where we're at right now in this crazy, wacky world that we're in, is a podcast called Prussia Gate. Very interesting. And it's, again, for history nerds, you'll eat it up because they go deep and they're able to cite all their sources. And it's an eye opener for sure.
Prussia Gate?
Prussia Gate.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list. I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. So many of us find ourselves needing to reset from time to time. I'm sure you know different. What do you do when you need to reset and refocus?
So for me, it's exercise, and getting out and getting fresh air, getting into nature. Back in 2008, I wasn't doing that. Right. I was in the midst of the grind. I was working full time. 2007, 2008, I was working full time at KW Plano. I was also building my website design company. I was building my training company. In many cases, I was working at like 4 a.m. Right. And then getting up and doing 9 to 5 at Plano. So I was burning the candle at both ends, and my health wasn't good. And I blew the meniscus in my knee. Right. I wish it was one of those adventure stories, like got hurt doing something crazy and wild, standing on top of a desk to change a light bulb, but my knee, as I step up, blows in 3 spots, pop, pop, pop. And I go to the surgeon, and I'm talking to the surgeon. Never met this guy before in my life, and he's the surgeon for one of the local schools and fixes all the athletes. And he's kind of looking at my chart, looking at me, kind of doing this whole thing. And then he finally just looks at me,